Hey, I'm Jess Lahey. I am the author of the New York Times bestselling The Gift of Failure, How the Best Parents Learn to Let Go So Their Children Can Succeed, and The Addiction Inoculation, Raising Healthy Kids in a Culture of Dependence. I was a teacher for 20 years. I have taught in every grade from 6 to 12. My heart lies in middle school, though. I was a columnist at the New York Times. I wrote a biweekly column called the Parent-Teacher Conference. It was all those questions parents were afraid to ask teachers, and all those questions teachers were afraid to tell parents, and I got to help bridge that divide. I taught for 5 years in a drug and alcohol rehab for adolescents, where my job was stripped down to its bare essence, which is engagement. How do we get kids engaged in learning for the sake of the learning itself? How do we undo some of the harm that overparenting and overly directive teaching does to kids? Because it turns out that overparenting is not just about hobbling your kids in terms of their self-confidence and their ability to go out into the world and be competent. It turns out it undermines not only their motivation, but their actual ability to learn. And I love teaching about that because it's really not that difficult to understand how we undo the damage that we've wrought. Often when I talk about the gift of failure, and when I get to go, for example, into a school, I'll often speak to the students during the day, and then I talk to the teachers in the afternoon, and I speak to the parents in the evening, which allows me to really close that circle, whether it's the vocabulary or the mindset or just the big picture of what we're talking about. And I give the kids my email address when I speak to them during the day, and I say, look, I'm talking to your teachers this afternoon, and I'm talking to your parents this evening. What do you really need them to know? What are they not hearing when it comes from you? And I promise I will share that with them. Just between the two of us, it's usually one of about 10 things, but it's amazing when I can go to the teachers or go to the parents and say, look, I asked your kids today what they really need from you, and here's what they shared with me. And it allows me to get everyone on the same page about focusing on the process of learning and less on the end products, the grades, the points, the scores, all of that. It also allows me to dispel a lot of myths about what we think works for learning as opposed to what we really know from the brain science that works for learning. I'm there to get kids engaged in their education, get them understanding that I'm on their side. I'm trying to teach them about what will work to help them engage more in their learning, be less bored, take control of their education if they've never had the opportunity to do that before. And then I get the opportunity to do professional development around brain science, learning in the brain with the teachers, talk about things like formative assessment and desirable difficulties and all of those things. And then for the parents, I connect all of those dots. Here's how the things we're doing as parents and teachers affect how kids learn, retain information, have durable information over the long term in their brains, and get more engaged for the sake of the learning. And here's how we can increase our connections with those kids. Now, when it comes to the addiction inoculation, things can get a little tricky because some parents, some people are really scared of this information. And I get it. I'm a woman in recovery. I have 10 years of recovery under my belt now, but it took me a long time to get there. But when I did get there, I wanted to understand what's real and what's myth. How do I make this stop with me? Because I was born to an alcoholic, that parent was born to an alcoholic, and blah and blah. It goes on forever and ever. I wanted to understand how I can make this end with me. What role does genetics play in substance use disorder and substance use in the first place? And what are the real risk factors and what are the real protective factors? None of this magical thinking about what we hope works, crossing our fingers and deploying programs in schools that don't actually work. What's the best practices for education and for parenting? That's what's in this book. Here's the secret, though. If your community might be scared about attending something that has to do with substance use disorder, it dovetails beautifully with the gift of failure because, as it turns out, many of the things I talk about in the gift of failure, promoting self-advocacy, promoting self-efficacy, getting kids really engaged in that process and less in the end product, those are all things that activate the dopamine cycle, which is why kids will often turn to substances. I also help kids understand that they need to name their emotions in order to tame their emotions, another big reason that kids often turn to substances. So when I go into a school under the guise of the gift of failure, but I'm sneaking the substance use prevention in there, it works well for everyone. If you'd like to know more about what I do, go to jessicalahey.com. There are links there to 170 episodes on the addiction inoculation that were published on Instagram and on TikTok, at Teacher Lahey on Instagram, at Jess Lahey on TikTok. And I'm just in the middle now of doing a daily series on the gift of failure on Instagram and TikTok as well. And there are videos on work I've done, South by Southwest EDU. I've been on Armchair Expert, The Tim Ferriss Show, The Daily Stoic with Ryan Holiday, The Rich Roll Show. I used to be on the Today Show fairly frequently, and all of that is on my website. So thank you so much for spending time with me today. I hope I have the opportunity to visit your school, your community program, your conference. I have the coolest job in the world, which is to learn about the things that I get curious about and that are out there in sort of in the zeitgeist, and find out what works, what doesn't work, what the myths are, get at the real learning, and then translate it for all of you. So thank you so much for paying attention. I'm really grateful for your time.